Recently, I posted a video over on the Hungarian channel in which I talked about some significant eyebrow-raising sex and pedophile scandals involving public servants and politicians, mostly on the government side, from the past couple of years, and attempted to connect the dots between them. It did relatively well, and I received several requests to make an English version, so here we are. Just a heads up, this video will delve into a topic far different from the ones I've talked about before, and some of you may find the content disturbing, in case it wasn't obvious from the title and thumbnail already. Let's start with the story of Gábor Kaleta, the ex-Hungarian ambassador to Peru. American authorities managed to shut down the South Korean child porn sharing website called Welcome to Video in 2018, which operated on the dark web. According to the site's Wikipedia article, it had about 1,200,000 regular and 4,000 paid users. At the beginning of 2018, the Americans managed to hack the site's server, and by backtracing cryptocurrency payments, they managed to identify the site's operator and several paid users. It's likely that this is how they identified Gábor Kaleta, Hungary's ambassador to Peru, along with about 336 others, as one of the users of the site. The Americans presumably notified the Hungarian authorities at the beginning of 2019 that the ambassador was probably in possession of prohibited pornographic content. According to the statement given to the RTL TV channel by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kaleta was brought back home from Peru on April 25, 2019, by two police officers who were sent to get him on April 23rd. After Kaleta was brought back to Hungary, the authorities started an investigation, and in November 2019, he was charged with possession of child pornography. However, the Hungarian public would not have learned about all of this until an opposition news outlet called The Index published in February 2020 about why the Hungarian ambassador was removed from his position. The authorities were pretty sparse with information on the case in other areas as well. For example, people had to learn from information that leaked to the press that around 19,000 child pornographic videos and photographs were found on Kaleta's various hard drives, at least according to one news outlet. Another claimed that this number was 300,000. Based on what I've read, the 19,000 is the more likely version, but I did not find any official confirmation. In May, due to COVID lockdown without trial, Kaleta was sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended for 2.5 years, and fined around $1,400 for possession of child pornography. The prosecution, however, asked for the trial to be held due to the lightness of the sentence. At the trial, the prosecutor asked for the same punishment if Kaleta admitted his guilt, so Kaleta immediately admitted it, and the judge, using this as an excuse, sentenced Kaleta to 1 year suspended sentence and a fine of $1,500. Do you understand? The prosecutor requests that a trial be held because the penalty was too light in his opinion, but when the trial is held, he or she only asks for an extra $100 as a punishment. Using this as a pretext, the judge does not hand a harsher punishment. To me, it almost seems like the judge and the prosecutor are supposed to exonerate him due to the outside pressure, and they both hoped they could shift responsibility to the other. Mind you, the country's highest prosecutor, Peter Polt, used to be a member of the currently governing Fidesz party, and everyone knows he is essentially there to sabotage any criminal proceedings that would target their members or be unpleasant to the government. It is absolutely clear from the course of events that the Hungarian government helped Kaleta out. They brought him home in secret and did not inform the public why he was removed from his position or that he was under criminal investigation. And after the whole incident became public knowledge, the authorities told us almost nothing about the case, even though people had a lot of questions. All we know about the details of the case is what was leaked to the press. Another indication that the government helped Kaleta out is what the aforementioned Peter Polt, the chief prosecutor, answered a question asked by one of the opposition members of the parliament. I quote, "No specific data emerged that indicate that Gábor Kaleta paid for the 19,000 pornographic images and videos found on his computer." Peter Polt said this despite all the signs that point to the fact that Americans identified Gábor Kaleta through cryptocurrency payments, so he likely paid for at least some of the child pornography found on his hard drives. Poltz likely lied about this because possession of child pornography carries lesser penalties than purchasing and selling it. The secrecy around the case and the lightness of the sentence caused a significant outcry in Hungary, so much so that several government members, including Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, felt the need to comment on it. They all basically said that this sentence was unacceptable and there was nothing they could do about it, and if the rumors of them controlling the courts had actually been true, he would have gotten a much harsher sentence. They said all of this even though everyone in the country knows that the government tried to cover up the case. When they were unsuccessful, they arranged for the former ambassador to get away with a suspended sentence. There was a strange coincidence regarding the case. Csaba Mester, Kaleta's lawyer at the time of the trial, was a member of the White Lily Association, which, in principle, is an organization that dedicated itself to child protection. When this information became known, instead of distancing itself from him, the White Lily Association shut its Facebook page down and deleted almost all the data from its website, as if they had something to hide. The only thing that remains up there to this day is the donation link. Everyone in Hungary asked the same question: why did the government feel the need to help Kaleta out? When all of this became public, the whole ordeal was quite unpleasant for the governing party, Fidesz. According to every rational calculation, they should have sacrificed this career diplomat, but they chose not to do so. The question arises, if they didn't want him sentenced, why did they bring him home and charge him in the first place? This was obviously not done out of a need to maintain the law, but because the American authorities had informed them about the situation regarding Kaleta. For this reason, they had to do something. Otherwise, the Americans might see that the ambassador is still in his position. They can inform the Hungarian opposition press, which, by the way, is largely financed by them, as well as the Peruvian government, and that would mean an even bigger scandal than what we had otherwise. So, the Hungarian government decided to bring Kaleta back home quietly, charge him without informing anyone, and hope that the whole thing blew over their head without anyone noticing. I wouldn't be surprised if it were the Americans who told the news outlet Index why Kaleta was being acquitted after they saw that the case had not received any publicity. This is made more probable by the fact that the journalist András Desso, who wrote the first article about the real reason why the Peruvian ambassador was let go, mentioned years earlier that he has an American diplomat as a source. For this reason, he was contacted and investigated by one of the Hungarian secret services. However, instead of wondering why Fidesz bailed out Kaleta, I think it would be more reasonable to ask the question, what is the need for someone to have 19,000 child porno videos and photos according to one source, and 300,000 according to another? Because it's not a masturbation aid, that's for sure. Just think what a vast amount 19,000 is when it comes to videos and pictures. Take out your phone and see how many files are in your gallery. There's a good chance it won't be anywhere near 19,000. Scroll through them, add enough files in your head to reach 19,000, and then think about how much time it would take to have gotten to look through all of it, let alone collect it. It's a collection of a size that would take even the most seasoned porn addict years to amass. The same is exponentially true when it comes to 300,000 files. In my opinion, it's only possible to accumulate such a quantity if someone downloads everything they find without any sort of pre-selection or prior testing. But truth be told, Hungarian ambassadors usually have a lot of free time. To assume that someone collects such a quantity purely for personal use is like catching someone with several kilograms of cocaine and assuming that the person intended to snort it all by himself. This is not impossible, but it is much more likely that you caught a dealer. My logic may be wrong, but the way I see it, there's a good chance Kaleta was trading these files for money or favors. If so, only one question remains. Who were his customers? In the mid-2000s, there was a pretty famous blogger active on the Hungarian public square named Polgár Tamas, alias Tomcat. Now he is a has-been, but back in the day, he had a lot of cultural relevance. Around that era, a story appeared on his old blog. In Budapest, there is a Krishna center at the city's edge. It's essentially a converted family house. The monks living there woke up one night to the sounds of sirens, and it turned out there was a whole police operation taking place across the street. They went out to see the policemen armed with guns bringing out large, rough-looking handcuffed men, lots of drugs, and severely underdressed girls around 12 years old from one of the houses across the street. They asked one of the police officers what was going on there, who told them that they were raiding a drug den. After a while, they noticed a lot of radio chatter, and then a car with tinted windows rolled up. The police then led a man with a veiled face out of the drug den, put him into this black car, which then drove away with him inside. The monks asked one of the police officers who that guy with the covered face was. He was answered that it was Tamas Deutsch. You probably don't know this, but Tamas Deutsch is one of the founding members of the currently governing Fidesz party, which was a liberal party at its founding. He is also a high-ranking member of Fidesz, and he is a European Parliament member. Tomcat heard this because he is a member of the Krishna Church. His old blog is no longer available online, but the story is told in the 14th episode of his podcast, which is still available on YouTube. Years ago, one of the journalists of the Pesti Strakok news portal, which is essentially a government-founded pro-Fidesz news outlet, whom I don't think would be very happy if I mentioned him by name here, told me that József Szajer, who is also a Fidesz founder, and back then was a European Parliament member, was homosexual, and that he frequently traveled to Thailand so that he could have sex with underage boys in exchange for money. At the time, I didn't think too much of this rumor, but a few years later while in Brussels, József Szajer was caught by police at a homosexual orgy for lockdown violation and found with a bunch of drugs in his backpack. He apparently tried to escape the police by climbing down the house's eaves, but to no avail. After the incident, Zsolt Bayer, who is definitely an alcoholic and allegedly addicting to gambling as well, while also being a founding member of Fidesz and their number one talking head, made a very reckless statement in a TV show that he regularly appears in. In his statement, he said there used to be this guy on our side who was not Szajer, who, after years of knowing him, shyly admitted to him that he was a homosexual. Years later, that very same guy nonchalantly shared with him that he regularly goes to Thailand to have sex with underage boys. Should we believe Bayer when he says that this old comrade of his is not the same guy as József Szajer? If yes, how common is that in Fidesz? Another Hungarian ambassador who was removed from his position was the Hungarian ambassador to Thailand, Sylvester Busz, who lost his job in 2021 for allegedly going to orgies. However, according to news leaks, he did not do anything illegal, though no official statement was given. How likely is it that he was removed from his position for going to orgies but doing nothing illegal, considering that it seems Szajer's lifestyle was very well known among the government circles, and it bothered no one? In 2017, the server of the Hungarian pedophile forum called the Garden of Eden was hacked, and copies of its contents were sent out to the aforementioned pro-government news outlet called Pesti Strakok. However, the site journalist who specializes in child protection, Angela Fusi, only wrote about it in 2020, after the Kaleta case broke out, explicitly intending to distract their readers from the Kaleta case, and this is not me saying it. She literally states that in the article. She originally intended it to be a series, but after the second article, no new one was released on the topic. At the bottom of it, you can still read, "To be continued." I wonder why she decided to abandon the topic. In February 2023, several anti-fascists, mainly foreigners, attacked a total of 8 passers-by with batons, knives, and pepper spray on the streets of Budapest and public transport. On the screen, you can see CCTV footage of one such attack, which happened on the morning of February the 10th. They did all of this to attempt to discourage people from participating in the regularly held Kitores Tour, a 56-kilometer tour organized by the local far right. It commemorates the Hungarian and German soldiers who defended Budapest against the Soviet Red Army during World War II. On February 11th, at a left-wing counter-demonstration held near the starting point of the tour, police detained 2 foreign women and a man, as well as a Hungarian woman, in connection with the previous anti-fascist attacks. This Hungarian woman was Cristina Dobos, an activist of the Sikra movement led by an opposition member of the parliament, András Zsambor. After her arrest, the police searched Christina's apartment, where they found about 70,000 child pornography images and videos in the computer of her partner, Andras Egied. After he received a summons from the police for questioning, Andras Egied fled to a nearby forest where, according to press reports, he hanged himself at the old Soviet-era anti-air defense base on May 17th or 18th. Journalists from the news portal Metropole visited the scene of the suicide a few days later, where they found a burnt plastic toy doll in front of a tire, which was probably burned by Andras before committing suicide. The police investigation could not prove that either of them had anything to do with the Antifa attacks. Still, I would like to point out that Christina's alibi for the time of the attacks was provided by Andras, who previously worked at Lotte Cafe in Innsbruck, Austria, where the Antifa members who participated in the attack organized their trip to Hungary the previous year. Perhaps this Austrian connection is the reason why the Austrian news portal Express learned that among the child pornography found on Andras Egied's computer, some scenes were shot and recorded at Christina's apartment. However, the Hungarian police did not think that we should have known this, so we also had to learn about it from a foreign source. Anyway, the police stated that they had found nothing to prove that Christina Dobos had anything to do with these 70,000 photos and videos, even though some of it was recorded at her apartment. It's not like she could have known. On top of this, since Andras Egied, the primary suspect, died, the police decided to suspend the investigation and close the case. However, I have a few questions. Personally, I find it hard to believe that someone collects such a large amount of child porn only for personal use. So I would like to ask if Andras Egied traded with these files, and did the police even investigate this possibility? In the pornographic recordings that were made in Christina Dobos' apartment, are there any adults on those aside from Andras Egied? How did the minors in the recording get to the apartment? Who played a role in it? And did the police do anything to uncover this? And finally, I would like to know whether the police can completely rule out the possibility of murder in the case of Andras Egied's death. On February 2nd of this year, the liberal news outlet 444 wrote that on April 27, 2023, Katalin Novak, who back then was the president of Hungary, pardoned Endre Konya, the deputy director of the Bixi orphanage, who was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison because he knew that the director of the orphanage, János Vásárhelyi, molested at least 10 boys between 2004 and 2016. In addition, when János Vásárhelyi was dismissed from his position in September 2016, based on the complaint of a former resident of the institute, Konya tried to persuade one of the victims on the instructions of Vásárhelyi to give false testimony that when he told one of his caretakers that János was harassing him was a lie. The police already investigated Vásárhelyi for child abuse in 2011, but it seems they did not do a good job because no charges were brought against him. Despite this previous investigation, in August 2016, Vásárhelyi was awarded the civilian section of the Hungarian Bronze Cross of Merit at the suggestion of Prime Minister Orbán Viktor in recognition of his exemplary dedication to the education of disadvantaged children and their preparation for independent life. Just 1 month later, one of Vásárhelyi's victims committed suicide, after which one of the former residents of the orphanage reported Vásárhelyi to the police. As a result, he was relieved of his position. In August 2017, charges were brought against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison, which I think is a bit light, considering that someone committed suicide because of him, and that Konya Endre, whose only crime was that he covered the abuse up, received 3 years and 4 months in prison. The judge later tried to justify the light sentence he gave to Vásárhelyi, saying that the reason was his award, which apparently warranted a lighter sentence. You know, that award which he probably wouldn't have gotten in the first place if it was widely known what he does inside his orphanage. President Katalin Novak and the former Justice Minister Judit Varga, who was only a member of the parliament at the time, have since resigned from their positions due to the pardon. However, we still don't know why Endre Konya was pardoned in the first place. A journalist asked Viktor Orbán this question, and he answered, "You should ask this from the president. But there are signs that he is not as innocent in this matter as you would like us to think." First of all, as I already said, he was the one who nominated Vásárhelyi for the award. On top of that, it later came out that Vásárhelyi ran for a position in the Bixi City Council in 2002. and Orbán endorsed him at a local campaign event. It was also revealed that the lawyer who defended Konya and Vásárhelyi during the trial works for a company that Orbán's father and his brothers own. Moreover, there was an interview on a government website with Vásárhelyi where he said that they regularly held wrestling training for the children, with cooperation among other people, such as József Orbán. Well, József Orbán is the younger brother of Viktor Orbán. He is also the head of a wrestling association. Moreover, the village Felksút, where the Orbán family lives, is right next to Bixi, where the aforementioned orphanage is found. After a news outlet published that there was an interview where Vásárhelyi talked about his connection to the Prime Minister's younger brother, the interview was suddenly pulled down from the government websites. Only archived versions exist of it nowadays. There was a third man aside from János Vásárhelyi and Endre Konya who was charged with what happened at the orphanage. His name is Kunstar Bela. During the trial, he received 1.5 year suspended prison sentence for molesting 4 boys. As a reminder, Konya Endre, who I think committed a much lighter crime than Kunstar, was given a 3-year prison sentence. The question is, why did he receive such a light punishment compared to the others? In an article which appeared on the Atlatsos news site, they write that Kunstar had a stake in several companies. Among them was one that ended up bought by the Mészáros Group. The Mészáros Group is owned by Mészáros Lőrinc, who is the wealthiest man in Hungary. He is also a good friend of Viktor Orbán, as well as his former plumber. And I'm not kidding. Many believe that Lőrinc is just a straw man, and that his wealth actually belongs to Viktor Orbán or his party. Anyway, Kunstar's role in these companies is not entirely clear, but it seems that he was able to earn well from them because, in 2018 when he was convicted, he uploaded a picture to his Facebook page where he posed with his newly bought Lamborghini. The question remains, if he is so well off financially from his companies, why did he work as a simple caretaker in an orphanage? In order to answer this question, we have to talk about this guy first. He is György Sadl, the ex-president of the debt collector chamber. And yes, that's a real thing. It's a for-profit industry here in Hungary. He was arrested in November 2021 for bribing Paul Volner, then the Deputy Justice Minister, so that he would nominate people to open debt collector positions that Sadl wanted. Court documents of the case were later leaked to the press and several opposition politicians. Among them was a page first presented by Hadhasi Akos, an opposition parliament member, in a YouTube video. In my opinion, this page has not received enough attention from the Hungarian public. On it, a guy named Robert K., with a criminal background, who is György Sadl's accomplice, and who is currently in prison, written next to photos of members of the government, what blackmail they have and on whom. For example, next to the head of Finance Minister Mihály Varga, it is written that he stole tens of thousands of acres of land, which is not really interesting. The exciting stuff is written next to the portrait of the Deputy Prime Minister, József Szajer, who is in principle the second man in the country. I quote, "He is gay. There are several video recordings of oral sex in a hunting lodge with gypsy boys." József Szajer loves hunting, by the way, and he is also the leader of the Christian Democratic People's Party, which rules the country in coalition with Fidesz. If this is true, it would explain why György Sadl and his circles managed to acquire the monopoly of debt collection, which meant a lot of money for them. According to press reports, Sadl was on his way to acquire a decade-long government contract for animal control, which would have netted him an additional millions, maybe billions of dollars, before his arrest. In any case, it seems that the love of children is pretty widespread within the current government. Semhen, Deutsch, and Szajer are among those we know about, but they are probably just the tip of the iceberg. I would not be surprised if Fidesz were secretive about the case of Gábor Kaleta because he shared child pornography with high-ranking members of the government. I would not be surprised if the Pesti Srakak stopped the series of articles about the Garden of Eden because among the users of that page, there were also members of the government who were told to shut it down. I would not be surprised if the police terminated the investigation in the case of András Egyed because, if they had done their work properly, they would have found a smaller network, and some influential politicians would have been caught. And I would not be surprised if János Vásárhelyi received a light sentence, and Novak Katalin pardoned Konya Endre because they prostituted out some of the boys from their orphanage to politicians. For example, to József Szajer, who they serviced in a certain hunting lodge. I also wouldn't be surprised if Bela Kunstar bought a Lamborghini from the money he received for this, and not from his caretaker's salary. I have only one question left. How did Georgi Shadl get such a compromising recording of the country's deputy prime minister? We can get an answer to this question from a voice recording made by a guy named Peter Magyar, who is the ex-husband of Judith Varga, who used to be the justice minister and was the superior of the aforementioned Paul Volner. Magyar Peter recorded a private conversation between himself and Judith Varga, who was still his wife at the time. In the recording, Judith Varga talks about how Antal Rogan, who is the minister who leads the Chamber of Ministers, sent one of his men to the court to look through all the court documents and to tell the prosecutor to remove any mention of him from the Volner-Shadl case. Varga says that they unfortunately didn't manage to remove everything. Also, copies of the documents have already reached members of the press at that time. She also stated that Peter Polt could not keep tight enough control over the prosecutors because otherwise this would have never happened. She also said that they told Paul Volner 6 months before to stop taking bribes because his phones were tapped, which he didn't do. But the recording's most interesting statement is made by Magyar Peter, who says Shadl's parents were working for some sort of agency. Laszlo Taraxkai, the leader of the nationalist Mi Hazank party, later said in a video that according to his information, this agency is the Constitution Protection Office, which is probably the most important secret service agency in the country. Magyar Peter in an interview later confirmed this. In addition, Taraxkai talked about a network that survives every election in connection with the secret services in the aforementioned video. Magyar Peter also wrote in a Facebook post later that it is not a coincidence that no government has made the agent files public since the end of communism, because then it would be revealed, and I'm quoting here, how the country was ransacked in the first round around 1990 and by whom, and how the small financial circle which came to dominate the country still up to this day came to be. I wonder what Peter Magyar and Laszlo Taraxkai, who I assume are better informed than I, meant by this. Anyway, it seems that Shadl acquired the Semyon Gypsy Boys tape and everything else he used to blackmail members of the government through his parents' Secret Service connections in past. If the country's political leaders are compromised and blackmailed at this level and to this extent that even the deputy prime minister is compromised, it suggests to me that Viktor Orban is probably no different, and contrary to popular belief, he is, in fact, not in charge of the country. Perhaps Taraxkai and Magyar alluded to this in the video and the Facebook post mentioned above, that the country is actually controlled by a circle organized within the Hungarian secret services, and that they do all of this with various sex and drug videos of politicians and other compromising recordings. And they use all of it to plunder the average Hungarian of every penny they have. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to get as many blackmailable people as possible into positions of power, which is why people like Szajer can be among the country's political elite. I'm not 100% certain that this is the case, but unfortunately, this scenario seems quite logical, and to me, is very likely. Thank you for watching.